how I thought we would start our series in Mark, admittedly. I was excited for us to be together and talk about what it means for us to dive into the gospel through the lens of wholeness, which, as we've talked about all through our vision series, is like our word and our theme for the year. What does it mean to receive Christ's wholeness for ourselves? But then in Mark, we're going to be talking about Christ's fight for our wholeness. We're going to be talking about how in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus is portrayed as this active, courageous, intense, filled with energy. Like uh, Mark is filled with the Greek word for like afterwards more than any other gospel. Almost every story starts with afterwards, as if he never took a break. It's like he took a nap and then he went and did this, and after that he did this, and after that he did this, and you think Jesus did his whole ministry in like a week. That's how the Gospel of Mark moves us along so quickly instead of like the 3 years. Um, and that's what's so crazy about having so many different gospel accounts. It's something I'm so thankful for. It used to really bug me. I spent a lot of time like trying to figure out how to weigh them all. Um, what I love about them now is that they have these four pictures, these four accounts of Jesus's identity and who he really is. Actually, in the early church, they took four different pictures and applied them each to the different gospels, right? So Matthew, actually, it would be represented by a human, and it's said that like Matthew represented most fully the human nature of who God is. It starts out with his genealogy through time, right? Like all through the Bible, talks about the things that he struggled with and suffered for. He still does miracles, of course, but it really like nailed down what does it mean for Jesus to be divine and human. And then in Luke, which we did last year, you've got this picture of the ox, right? It is this sacrificial servant filled with strength. We talked about how the Gospel of Luke, like a lot of the themes are about caring for the poor, looking out for oppression, giving people room and space to be known and heard, and that especially like the Gentiles who were the people who were on the out and out for the Christian faith were brought in, right? Right as it moves towards Acts. And then you've got the Gospel of John, which I've never understood why the Gospel of John is supposed to be the gospel you introduce people at first, because it's definitely one of the weirdest ones. Like it's, where you have two gospels that start with a genealogy, then you've got John, and it's like in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God in the beginning. And you're like, what the heck is going on? That doesn't make any sense at all, right? And you have this picture of an eagle, right? An eagle is an animal that like flies through the air. He sees everything. You see this picture of John as divine, right? Or as Jesus as divine. This is the closest we get to like the mystery of Jesus's divinity and how it all works together. And then you got Mark. Can anybody guess what the animal picture for the Gospel of Mark always has been through church history? Anybody got a guess?
A road
Yes.
runner.
The road runner is not the right answer. But yeah, Matt, it's the lion, right? It's courageous, action oriented, and then it's a picture actually of the monarchy. We're going to see in Mark Jesus fully displaying his kingship over all creation, right? That he is the one who has authority over all things. And we'll talk about the things that he's going to have authority over, but those are the themes that we're going to pull out. And it's not that Jesus was four different people, but the reality is that every aspect of these represents the fullness of his personality. The reality that like he was this super complex person who started a movement, right, as God, and has now been given us and now has given us the opportunity for wholeness. And in Mark, we're going to talk about how he fought for it. And we do mean action, right? We jump right in Mark chapter 1 with like John the Baptist saying some stuff for like 3 or 4 verses, and then boom. Whereas in the other gospels, it's in like chapter 3 or 4 when he gets baptized. It's like verse 5. Jesus is baptized. Here he is. He's getting dunked. God says some stuff. He comes back up. And then what does he do next? He just immediately goes to the wilderness. It's like he literally like got out of the water and just walked away, right? It be like just into this field where it was filled with stuff. So he goes to the wilderness, and then 2 verses later, whereas all the other gospels have this long story of him being tempted by Satan, he's back and he's he's preaching the good news. And 4 verses later, he's calling his first disciples. And then, like 3 verses after that, he's driving out an unclean spirit out of somebody on the temple. And then his way out of town from the temple, he heals a whole bunch of people in town. And then he gets sleepy. And so he goes to a solitary place to pray. And then, as he's doing that, he prays some more people. And then, on his way back from praying, he's like, "We got to go." But then as they're leaving, he heals another person with leprosy. That's just chapter 1 of Mark, right? There's more stuff in the first chapter of Mark than there are in like whole like sections of the epistles. There's just all this stuff happening. And it's exciting to see how we can see Jesus at work, right? This, again, I can't say this enough. This is a Jesus of action, courage, movement, urgency. This is a Jesus who fights. And believe it or not, the most important verse to really understand this book is the very first verse of Mark. Mark 1:1. It says this: the beginning of the good news about Jesus the Messiah, the Son of God. I'll read it again because it's short. The beginning of the good news about Jesus the Messiah, the Son of God. And that might seem like pretty straightforward, like, no duh, aren't all the gospels basically about that? The answer is yes. But in Mark, we're going to see the fullness of what it means for Jesus to be the Messiah expressed. The reality of like him being the Son of God was something that people were suspicious of and confused about, and that had real ramifications on his life and in his ministry. And he reveals that secret to us, and then the whole rest of Mark plays out as kind of a drama mystery, because they'll never say it again. That's the most explicit that it will become, and the rest of the book will just be people being like, who is this dude? And Jesus will always be like, shh, it's a secret, don't tell anybody. And they'll be like, well, who's that? Why is he doing that? Let's go kill him for this, right? They don't understand the reality that he's this long awaited anointed person who's come to set Israel free, and by extension set humanity free, right? His messiahship's going to be played out in the fight with not with Rome, right? Which some gospels talk about that a lot. It's not his fight with the Pharisees, and it's not going to be like his fight with the disciples. But what we're going to see his messiahship expressed in is his fight with evil itself, the very reality that evil exists in our world and all the ramifications of sin. He's going to allude over and over and over again about how in Genesis 3, when sin came into the world, that that the world immediately entered into a state of not being God's original intention. And by expressing the kingdom and himself as the king, he is reasserting his authority and saying, no, we're going to move back. We are going to talk about the inbreaking of the kingdom. We are going to express wholeness, healing, justice, all the things we talked about even last week about what the church is supposed to be expressing. It's because the church is an expression of the kingdom of God. Provision, peace, justice. All of these things are going to be the gospel, what the Gospel of Mark holds up as Jesus being king of. And he has authority over every aspect of evil, right? Which means that there is nothing that can stand up to him in the midst of that. So he's going to attack all of the effects of sin. He's going to be, even in this chapter, he drives out a spirit of impurity. And even as the spirit's like, I know who you are, right? Like, I know you're the chosen one of God. He's going to be like, shut up and get out of here. The dude's gone, right? This is his authority and his power over impure spirits. You're going to see it in the healing of Peter's mom from sickness, which is power over sickness and disease. Like, boom, sin no longer has effect, and I'm going to be an expression of the inbreaking kingdom. You're going to see it as he prays alone with the Father, which is a demonstration of the separation that should be occurring between people and God because of their sin. But instead, he's like, no, I am not only one with the Father, but I'm submitted to the Father and I hear from him personally, right? You're going to see it when he um, comes into the life and touches a person with leprosy, right? In Jewish times, you were not, aside from the fact that you didn't want to get sick, touching people who were leprous was a big no no. Like that was bad. You were unclean. Uh, they were put in the outskirts of civilization for Israel. You're like not supposed to be around them. And yet Jesus walks right up to this dude, puts his hands on him and heals him, right? An embrace, a closeness, a bringing of wholeness, right? And this is what he's trying to demonstrate, even as in later chapters, he's going to fight with the Pharisees and he's going to fight with the evil of legalism that keeps people in bondage. He's going to point out the hypocrisy of governing authorities as they do the peace of Rome, but in reality, they've left millions of people disenfranchised and in poverty, right? He's going to point that out. He's like, this is the effect of evil and sin in the world. He's going to point out how his disciples are falling short and how even with being close to Jesus, there is a movement towards him. And then finally, he'll go to the cross and be raised again, right? After he's died, and he's going to conquer death itself, right? He has authority over death as the final blow. And in doing that, what the reason that we can move forward with the theme of wholeness is because Jesus changed the game, right? Whereas before in the Levitical law, what we were trying to do was keep ourselves separate from people, whether it was food or people who were strange or Gentiles or people who were sick, so that we could keep our purity to ourselves and we wouldn't get contaminated. Instead, now we see how Jesus has given us an opportunity as we express wholeness and holiness to walk into the lives of those people and our wholeness to spread to them, right? Jesus was around the worst of the worst and he was never quote unquote contaminated, right? He never walked away and was like, oh crap, I need to go like take a bath or I need to go like to the temple to go cleanse myself. He was a conduit for healing. He was a conduit for making people whole, for helping people find community, for showing people light, for bringing freedom. He was a conduit for those things. And now we as his disciples get to be the exact same. We get to walk into situations in people's lives as we are being made whole and transfer that wholeness and that holiness to others and really give people the opportunity to receive Christ's grace, right? And like receive community, receive the beauty of the gospel. This is like the most beautiful thing that we have to express. And it's just hard to believe, even in our culture, as we think about legalism and different church movements, how off track we've gotten, right? In terms of having the exact same mind as the Pharisees. Like, let's separate ourselves from this impurity. Let's separate ourselves from this corruption, which is right in the sense that we're not called to be a part of it, right? We are called to live lives of holiness, but that holiness is for the sake of others. That our ability to be in then the lives of people is only going to be light in the darkness. One of my favorite illustrations that I'll always remember from my mentor in college is he was trying to explain holiness to me because I just didn't understand it. And he's like, hey, so say you're in a dark room. I'm like, okay, I'm in a dark room. He like turned out the lights and he brought out a lighter. He's like, well, okay, sorry. He goes, how much power does darkness have in this moment? And he didn't have any windows in his office. So it was pitch black. And I was like, well, feels like all of it because I can't see anything. And then he brought out a lighter and he flicked it on, right? He's like, tell me how much power darkness has over this light right now. Like, what can the darkness do in this moment to overcome the light that this like tiny flame is giving off? I was like, well, I guess nothing, right? Like even a small light has more power over a whole room filled with darkness. And it might feel like the exact opposite is true most of the time. And it's like, well, what is a small light going to do? I don't know, but it feels like it could do a lot. And that's the kind of thing that Jesus walked into as one human person. Of course, he was also divine. He walked into a world of darkness. And the question is, what, actually, this is from John, like Jesus was a light, and it says the darkness could not overcome it. And he was just one light. And look what he was able to accomplish, right? Now, with the Holy Spirit in us, we are a ton of lights, right? We have the capability to walk into places of darkness and be a light that the darkness has really no power over. Um, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about in Mark. What does it mean to call a Jesus of action and urgency and grit and aggressiveness and courage and Lord? And how are we going to say yes to that? And I'm really excited about it. Um, I'm really excited to see people. Oh, I don't know what just happened. Can you guys still hear me? I'm excited in this series to for people to walk in greater authority in their faith. I'm really excited to see people see a Jesus of action and say, you know what, like maybe I do not have to be afraid of this thing in the way that I thought I was. Maybe there is like, and the word courage has been on my mind a lot in 2021. Maybe there is a courage that I'm called to be instilled with that comes from the Holy Spirit that's going to make me move forward in this way, or that's going to make me ask these questions when I don't feel like I should. Um, what does it mean for us to courageously move things out of our schedules and out of our lives to make more time for intimacy and wholeness, right? Because it's not something that just happens all at once. Um, One of my favorite teachers uh, said in a book I was reading, you can have as much Jesus as you want as long as you're willing to pay the price. And I think that that idea is very courageous. That one, you have to ask yourself, how much Jesus do you really want? Right? Like how much intimacy do you really want with the Lord? And then two, am I really willing to pay the price for that intimacy, for that wholeness? Um, I don't know if the church at large has prepared us for that question super well, but I really hope that in this season you'll really be able to discern um, what it means to be courageous, as Jesus presented by the Gospel of Mark um, is made clear to us. Does anybody have any questions about Mark before I kind of not do a really hard move towards debriefing our assessment, but um, kind of take a step forward and talking about how our emphasis on wholeness in Mark is also going to play a role in how we see the whole year playing out from the results of our discipleship assessment. Does anybody have any questions about that? You can raise your tiny animated hand or sit in silence. Either is fine.